Hello, Colin Dildine here from SHG Advisors, and today I'll be leading the presentation of this Programmatic Excellence Virtual Assembly. During this virtual assembly, we will explore how housing and homelessness providers and communities in Colorado can leverage the Colorado Homeless Information Management System, or COHMIS, tracking tools to increase outcomes for the people and communities you serve. Before we get started today, I want to cover the agenda for what we will be discussing today. We will start with an overview of data-driven practice and a step-by-step breakdown of what is data-driven practice actually, what is required of the organizations, and what do high-performing organizations do with their data to have it transcend just being sort of a static part of your job into something that can actually drive outcomes for clients. And then I'll pass the presentation to Matt Richards from the Colorado Department of Local Affairs, Office of Homeless Initiatives, where he will discuss how you can leverage the COHMIS to strengthen care coordination and outcomes, and how you can leverage the tools built into the system to ensure that the data you are entering is quality, accurate, and ready for analysis. So, what is data-driven practice actually? During the November virtual assembly, we covered the levels of engagement for data-driven improvement, but I think it's important to review again before we dive into deeper detail. The first level of engagement is functional engagement. On this slide, I have a few descriptors of what I think define a functional level of engagement with data-driven improvement. The first is that the data is manual and requires human intervention at each and every step, and that the processes for entering that data are highly dependent on the person who's entering the data. They enter it into the fields that are presented on the screen, but there aren't necessarily processes or standards for how it's entered, what those data fields mean, or what they might look like. It's all really dependent on the person who's entering the data. Second is that the data is often entered in a very siloed manner. So, for example, while your organization may capture the same data for various programs that you administer at your organization, the data you capture is often segregated by program and recaptured multiple times, although you may already have that data in the system. You recapture it for the purpose of a different program, meaning that the data that you're entering lives exclusively within the direct program you're operating under at that time. Nothing happens with the data after it's entered outside of reporting. Another descriptor is that the data is purely descriptive. The data you capture describes the service interactions at your organization and nothing more. It's never leveraged for further analysis, or the data you capture doesn't really help inform um, either process measures that can inform outcomes or the outcomes that are actually occurring at your organization. And this is often a very natural part of data-driven improvement, a necessary component. You can't have a level 2 or level 3 level of engagement with data-driven improvement without descriptive data, but nothing happens beyond that. And finally, the data you capture is often incomplete and highly needs driven. What I mean by this is that the data you capture is often almost exclusively shaped by the requirements that funders have set forward for receiving their funding, and is used to report on the progress of how those funds were utilized and how many people were served, and some base level of outcomes that ensure you're satisfying compliance with the funder's requirements and demonstrating some level of impact. Having this be level 1 is not to say that this is a bad or derogatory look on data-driven practice. The vast majority of nonprofit and for-profit organizations are at this level. It's part of just the daily hum of the organization, something that's required to occur, but it's never really leveraged for a further operational or strategic purpose, which leads us into level 2, which is a strategic level of engagement with data-driven improvement. Descriptors of this level are as follows. First, processes are standardized. The data you entered may still be manual, but there will be more set and routine procedures you follow for entering that data, the knowledge and understanding around what data is collected and when, and what you're inputting has sort of a shared knowledge and understanding is very well defined at an organizational and individual level. Second, that you have performance measures well defined. Under the functional level of engagement, there may be some level of outcome measurement, but almost exclusively what you're looking at is outputs of the services you have administered. And this looks like the number of people you may serve or have engaged along with your services. And there may be some performance measures you look at, some of the most common ones being exits to permanent housing, or exits from program, but performance measures often go beyond that and have sort of a standard set of performance measures that you think meaningfully reflects the services administered, but goes beyond that to speak to the outcomes and impact of what those services had on the clients and communities that you may serve. A strategic level of engagement also looks at data entry in terms of it being timely and accurate. This is likely facilitated by the fact that your processes are standardized and there is the infrastructure in place for your organization and your staff to be able to enter data in a set way with set expectations, and that you know what you're gathering is likely complete and able to paint a full picture of the services that were offered and some of the impact that may have occurred. And finally, your data-driven practice is less reactive and more proactive. So instead of exclusively capturing data and engaging with data for that matter, for the purposes of funders or reporting on how you leveraged funds you may have received from DOLA or other funders, you think about data on a more strategic level and you're proactive in terms of what you want to capture, how you want to capture it, how often you review it, etc. Level 3 is transformational engagement with data-driven improvement. This is the least common level of engagement, and very few for-profit or nonprofit organizations ever reach this level. But this level of practice is defined by the fact that data is often integrated, meaning that data you enter for one program informs a larger data set that can define that person within your system and can be leveraged in further ways. So leaning back to the example of if you have the same person receiving multiple services or engaging in multiple programs at your organization, you're able to enter that data once, and then the data entry you complete beyond that is purely for programmatic purposes. You can kind of cut off some of the more manual components of data you would need to capture, and it's all sort of used for an organizational purpose. The second descriptor is that measures are routinely reviewed. This means that there's likely some set cadence on which you're reviewing data, both for data quality, but also sort of progress on your performance metrics. So let's say you have set a performance measure around how quickly a person exits your program and where they exit to. Transformational data-driven improvement would dictate that you review that data, let's say monthly, to really review your progress towards success on that measure or progress towards a goal you set for that performance measure. Third is that you use that data to help inform strategies and set goals. So that data is not actively just living in the system as a reporting tool. It goes beyond that and helps sort of inform what your organization does, where it wants to go. It's used as just another tool in the tool belt for determining success and what your organization needs to do to better serve the people and communities where you live. And finally, and I think this is really important, is that staff are broadly engaged around data, meaning that it's not just a select few staff that have access and regularly think about or talk about data. It's become part of your everyday culture, where everyone at every level of the organization has some level of context for how the organization is performing and what their role in shaping that performance looks like. This isn't to say that every member of your staff will have the same level of knowledge or expertise or willingness to think through that data, but it means it's available and it's a part of your procedures and it's just part of how your organization functions. So when you think about the levels of engagement, you can think of it as sort of a gradient as how your organization practices and actually makes the data work for you, as opposed to your organization just working to produce data. So what underpins the levels of engagement? Because there's a lot that goes into it. First and foremost is data infrastructure. Do you have the tools to measure what is meaningful? A lot of housing and homelessness providers are constrained and often don't have the resources to really meaningfully think about data infrastructure or have the funding and ability to leverage the most cutting edge tools. But fortunately, all housing and homelessness providers should have access to the COHMIS if they're receiving HUD funding, and that is a tremendous tool that Matt will talk about later in terms of capturing data and setting up the infrastructure to meaningfully complete analysis and to really have this integrated into your day-to-day operations. Two is process. Do the processes at your organization align with that right data? Does it support the capture of quality data? So having sort of procedures, processes, daily practices, and sort of that fungible infrastructure to be able to do data-driven improvement have to be in place, because if you have data but you're not meaningfully using it and there's no routine set up around the data, nothing will really happen. Third is around practice. So how do those processes actually manifest? How are they used? What's the ultimate impact of you leveraging that data or thinking through questions around data and how you can sort of move forward as an organization, set goals, etc. And finally, who is engaged in conversations around data and who has access to that data? Who can see the data? So not every staff member has to have the same level of exposure to the data that your organization captures or the performance measures that you're reviewing, but people should have a relative idea of what's being captured and some idea around performance. Otherwise, if data just lives within one or two staff members, it becomes just an exercise that you're completing because you have to, rather than a more culturally ingrained operational element of how your organization does business and how you serve your clients, which is ultimately what this is about, is how can we use data to be able to learn new and different things, to be able to more effectively serve the clients that come through your doors or who live in your community. So you may be asking yourself, well, what do data-driven processes look like? So I have this process that we look at that is often referred to as the plan, do, study, act cycle. And I have some descriptors below each step that we'll walk through here. First, on planning and mapping, you have to start by asking, what do you want to know? What would be meaningful for your organization to look at, measure, and actively review? Have those sorts of questions or sort of guideposts set up in your mind as you're thinking about what you may want to get from the data. Second is really thinking through what processes or programs may be impacted by a data-driven improvement. So really thinking through what are the day-to-day operations and components of how your programs function that may be impacted. And then most importantly is what data do you need to collect to inform and answer the questions that you want answered, which is that first bullet there. Because questions are good, but ultimately they can only be as useful as the data you have to gather, whether that's pulling things from the COHMIS or from other systems, or even setting up independent data capture to be able to answer the question. You should have sort of an incremental understanding of what data you'll need to be able to answer and inform those discussions in the future. And finally, what actions do you need to take to actually do? What are the things you need to change? What processes may need to be modified? What actions do you need to take, which leads us to do. So you actually make the changes you theorize will make a difference, whether that be tinkering with part of a process or changing how you do intakes with clients or how you engage landlords. You have to actually just make the change. And that action should be thoughtful and limited. Organizations can't really function in the we should do something different. Immediately implement that change at scale and move forward. Part of data driven improvement is being able to really isolate changes. And the way to most thoughtfully do that is through doing it at a more limited scale. Think of a pilot implementation of a change you might want to make so you can be able to study, which is the next step, the impacts of what that change might be. So here you'd be able to routinely review data to really study if that change you made a meaningful impact. And you'd want to be able to review that data with the staff that are closest to the operation of the data. And then I think importantly under study is just to continue to sort of iterate through changes as needed. If you find out one thing hasn't worked or hasn't made a difference with your performance measure or the data you're reviewing, continue to make changes. There's no right answer or no sort of go back to step one part of this process. It can be as simple as just sort of iterating and ensuring that what you're doing is making a difference, adding value, and generating impact. But let's say that the change you make is making a positive difference and your pilot implementation is going successfully, but you want to test it at scale, which is the last step in the process, which is to act, which is to the point of, being able to more on an organizational level socialize those impacts and really have it become part of your daily practice or the practice of your program or service you provide to your clients or to your community. And that's where that change becomes a lasting part of your business. But you may be asking yourself, this all sounds well and good, interesting, and something worth exploring, but you still may be asking yourself as well, why does this matter? How does data translate to direct impact for what our organization does and for the people and communities we serve? First and foremost is care coordination. Data can help you understand who in your communities is actively experiencing homelessness and in need. Two, it can help you know who is working with whom across providers, partners, and your community more broadly. Three is that it can help build a shared record for care coordination so every household is accounted for. And four, it can help you enter timely updates on contacts, needs, and action items for each person. And there are specific tools in the COHMIS for how data can help with care coordination, and Matt will cover that in his portion of the presentation. But data also matters because it can help sort of define the scale of storytelling and how you really make that data become tangible, become reality, and become something that people care about. First and foremost, it helps you see the scale and characteristics of your response system, which is vitally important for being able to really understand a population level understanding of homelessness. A lot of people really gear their understandings towards individual experiences that may add up over time to form a holistic understanding, but data can help you form in a very discrete way a broader understanding at a community and population level what that looks like. Two is that you can use data to tell the story of your organization's efforts and some of the outcomes and successes of your organization. While a story of a particular individual, family, or household can be meaningful, thinking about it at scale and at a community level can really bolster the impact and the magnitude of the services you offer and can help really influence people like communities, supporters, people who like may be skeptical or cynical of the services you offer. And importantly, you can also use those insights and use data to help inform the public and policymakers. So people with decision-making authority and influence over what happens in your community, that data and that data story can help really add sort of detail and help really inform the conversation in a way that more closely aligns with reality. And I think a really important aspect of data storytelling and data-driven improvement is the fact that it can help strengthen your applications for funding sources and for additional resources in your community. I think often in the nonprofit sector, we gravitate towards telling that human level story to invoke emotion, which is important. But what's also important is being able to sort of quantify and use data to buttress that story and broaden the scope of impact at a broader, more community level. So, in summary, data-driven improvement can impact care coordination in a number of ways. It can help you evaluate what's working, what do we need to improve, what lessons are we learning over time through the programs we're administering, and how we're interacting with our community. Data also helps you sort of tell the story of impact. It helps inform advocacy, whether it's for additional funding or more systematic changes in your community. And ultimately, data makes the invisible visible and puts the all important numbers to the stories and lived experiences of the people you interact with on a day to day basis. And when you're able to demonstrate impact, you're able to sort of inform investment. Data can help you tell the story of how resources are leveraged and where your priorities for those resources need to be, which can ultimately all funnel towards improved outcomes where your services are able to meet community needs and ultimately increase safe and stable housing. Now I'll pass it over to Matt to really talk through a lot of these more conceptual things we've discussed and really go through how it is tangible and material in the COHMIS and how your organization can sort of take action based off the information you learned from this presentation up to this point.
Thanks, Cullen. And hi, everyone. I'm Matt Richard. I'm the Homeless Systems Data and Reporting Manager here at the Office of Homeless Initiatives at the Colorado Division of Housing. And I'm excited to talk to you about ways you can use COHMIS to strengthen care coordination and outcomes for your participants. One of the great things about COHMIS is that there are a number of built-in tools intended to strengthen care coordination available at your fingertips by default, including care team functionality and secure messaging, where you can see which providers are working with participants and message them securely right within the system. You also have the ability to add public alerts to flag time-sensitive updates, which can help inform other providers on potential housing opportunities or participant needs. You can ensure that you are keeping contact details and address information up to date for your participants to make sure they can be reached and supported effectively. And you can also upload files, store and share those key documents securely within the system to help speed up application processes and help folks out if they misplace a document that has been uploaded to the system previously. Each of these sections we'll dive into in more detail in just a moment. I'd also call out there are links that are included here to where you can read more about each of these functionalities in the attached slide deck. Up first, let's talk about the care team, which is where you can see which providers are working with participants. To see this, if you are on client profiles in the system and you scroll down toward the bottom right of that profile, you'll see a care team section. It shows all providers associated with that participant's care team. And users who create enrollments for participants in the system are automatically added to the care team for immediate coordination. But you can also manage the care team and add or remove staff members as needed to ensure the right people are showing up in this section who are actively working with that participant. You can also securely message any care team member super easily by hovering over one of those care team members' initials in the bottom right of those profiles. When you hover over, a little pop-up box with that user's name and email address will display, and you'll also see a little send message box. When you click that, you'll get taken to this compose secure message page where you'll have the ability to enter any relevant details in that note. You can mark up the text, make things bold, italicized, add bullets or numbers. Whatever you need to do, you can do in this kind of secure section. and then you can send that message to that care team member, and they will receive an email letting them know that they received a message within HMIS, but not any of those details. The details remain securely stored within the messaging application. The email just flags that you got a secure message, if you follow me. You also can access your secure messaging inbox to view messages that you've received or that you've sent by clicking on this envelope icon in the kind of top menu bar of the system, kind of next to your name and initials in the top right corner of the interface. When you click on that icon, you'll be taken to this kind of inbox section where you can see those messages that you've received and sent to folks. You'll also see this new message section, which is another way that you can message end users in the system, whether they're a part of a care team or not. When you click new message, this secure message dialog box comes up again, and you'll have the ability to pick the COC or continuum of care that end user works in. When you pick that COC, then you'll get a list of agencies that have projects that operate in that COC. And you'll also be able to pick a specific receiver or end user you want to message. This is the training site in this example. So user one would be, another staff member's name in the system. After you pick that, you can create your message, kind of compose it, and then send it along to them. And they'd receive that email to whatever email is associated with their HMIS account, letting them know that they received a message. And when they logged in and navigated to their inbox, they'd be able to see the relevant details. Public alerts are another powerful tool for care coordination. It's where you can flag important updates for other care coordinators. And these are available in the Notes tab. After you navigate to the Notes tab, kind of at that client profile level there at the top, you'll be able to click Add an Alert there, kind of toward the middle bottom of the screen. On the next screen, you'll be able to enter the relevant details for the public alert. And there are a couple of required fields here, including the title of the public alert and the expiration date. And the expiration date is really how long should this alert remain visible on this participant's profile for other end users when they log in and navigate to this person's profile, right? There are alerts that you might need to flag that are time sensitive for a few weeks, for a month. This expiration date is directly tied to how long the alert will display in the system when that profile is pulled up. You also have the ability to enter any relevant notes. Generally, these are encouraged to be used for care coordination, right? If there's a housing opportunity or you're looking to get a hold of this person and need some assistance and want to flag that for other end users, perfectly valid use case for a public alert. There are also instances where maybe you need to flag an alert for your other agency staff members for the organization where you work, but maybe it's not appropriate to flag that more broadly for every end user who can pull this person's profile up. In those instances, you can toggle this private option on, which will create what is kind of referred to as a private public alert, right? So this is great for flagging things for just your agency staff members who might pull this profile up. Maybe there's a piece of mail or something that's agency specific you want to flag for your team if they present, but it might be a little bit outside the scope of what is appropriate for other providers to be seeing. Toggling that on makes this that private public alert for just your agency. And after creating a public alert, as long as it has not expired yet, you'll see this public alert banner that displays at the top of this person's profile when you pull them up in the system. You can click review notes there and be taken right to that alert. So that's why we kind of encourage this to be targeted to care coordination or really things that are appropriate to be flagging across agencies. If it's not a private public alert, want to make sure we're taking advantage of all of the functionalities the system offers, but also using them appropriately to help connect our participants to better outcomes and housing opportunities. You can also securely store contact information for participants right within the system. And this is able to be viewed and accessed by other end users of the system as well for care coordination purposes. So to get started, you would navigate to the Contact tab from that kind of client level tabs at the top after navigating to a profile. And then you can click Add Contact. After clicking Add Contact, this kind of new window pops up where you can select the contact type, right? It's contact information for the client themselves, right? Here is their email address, their phone number, the date that this contact is being added to the system, and any notes that you'd like to add related to this contact information. After adding contact information to the Contacts tab for a participant, you'll be able to see kind of one row per contact that exists for them. And if your agency added the contact information, it's editable for you and other staff members at your agency. There'll be this pencil icon that you can click into and edit any details accordingly. If another agency, a staff member at another agency added that contact information, you'll be able to see this kind of row worth of that data, but you wouldn't be able to edit or update or amend anything for it. And if any notes were added, like in the previous example, we took a quick note about how it's best to call after 5 p.m. And weekends are fine anytime before 8. If you hover over that notes icon, even if your agency didn't add it, you can still see the qualitative details that another provider has added. So this is really, an underutilized section of the system, and it's a really important one too, to make sure we're able to connect with folks and make sure we're updating things for them when their contact information is changing. So this tab is kind of your one-stop shop for that. And just like with contact information, you can also add, view, and manage key location details for participants within the Location tab. And this is for things like mailing addresses or places participants can be found, or their last permanent residence prior to their experience of housing instability or homelessness. And you can click on this kind of Add Address button to start adding an address in the system. After clicking Add Address, just like with adding contact information, you'll be able to enter the key details. So for example, you'll pick an address type. And in this example, I'm entering a last permanent residence, or the last place this participant was stably housed prior to their experience of homelessness or housing instability. And you'll give the address a name, and then after that, you'll click Add Location. And after clicking Add Location, this new kind of box pops up where you'll have the ability to enter that address and click Add. And I'd call out that for a last permanent residence, we don't need or expect or require that actual street address. This is more around trying to understand where folks were last stably housed prior to their experience of homelessness or housing instability. So Denver, Colorado, for example, when I type that in, that's perfectly sufficient here for this use case. I can select it and click Add. I could also enter 80203, right? If you are noticing you're not getting results for a specific address or location, there's this kind of limit geographic area address suggestion dialog box or toggle that if you are getting no results, toggle that off and make sure it's kind of more open, especially if someone might be last stably housed outside of Colorado. By default, the system is trying to limit results to a certain mile radius from Colorado. And opening this up will give you the ability to, cast that net a bit wider. After you enter those details, you can click Add, and then you'd have the ability to enter any notes that you need to there on the left if you'd like, and then save those changes to add this location for this participant. And just like with contact information, addresses that have been added are visible to other providers, just this time in that Location tab instead of the Contact tab. Addresses added by your agency or any staff members at your agency are editable by you and other staff members at your agency. Addresses added by other agencies are viewable here in the results, and you can still hover over those notes and see relevant details. But if your agency didn't add it, you can't edit or modify it, if you follow me. And I highlighted last permanent residence as the location in the previous slides to show you an example of what's possible when we do collect data above and beyond the default requirements of our system. We have a section on our intake paperwork for folks who feel comfortable sharing with providers with our system. Where were you last permanently housed prior to experiencing homelessness or housing instability? And when we collect this information, we're able to create reports and dashboards that demonstrate, based on available data, overwhelmingly, people being served in COHMIS report being last permanently housed in Colorado. So kind of an opportunity for data collection. Again, it's completely optional for participants. This is not a requirement, but it does help us create these types of reports, which can be helpful at pushing back at harmful narratives like folks moving to Colorado to experience homelessness. Based on our available data, limited though it is, this is from a dashboard that is, not up and running at the moment, but it's what we can, the types of things we can do with that information. Overwhelmingly, folks are reporting being last permanently housed right here in Colorado. So I wanted to highlight, kind of what's possible when we do collect this data. And that's a perfect segue to the next portion of the presentation, which is really fully leveraging the customization and flexibility of COHMIS to move beyond the default data collection requirements of the system. We have the ability to add custom fields, right? Targeted data points to support specific use cases. Custom assessments, grouping of related fields into structured data collection tools, and services which document specific assistance and activities being provided to participants. Before we dive into the customization options and moving beyond the basics, it's probably important to make sure we all understand what those basic mechanics of COHMIS data collection actually are. So at its core, at its most basic, our system is built around profiles and enrollments, right? Each person gets a profile. There's one profile per client. Groups of profiles get linked together in the front end of the system and form household units. And then either individual clients or groups of clients are enrolled together into projects which are available at within specific agencies, just boiling it down to its core. When we dive a little bit deeper and look at the data collection stages of the system, right, each person has a profile, identifying and demographic details about each person. Within enrollments, we have project starts, we have updates, and we have exits. And I view these really as snapshots of participants' situations at the time of that data collection stage. So for project starts, this is the snapshot of their situation when they were enrolled into the project. For updates, think status updates, think annual assessments, think current living situations, right? These are snapshots of situations at the time that update is occurring. And particularly for annual assessments and status updates, those help you track progress for participants over time, right? Changes to income or non-cash benefits or health insurance. And on the other side of project start, we have project exit. So that's the snapshot of that person's situation at the time they're exiting from the project. And custom fields can be added to any of these data collection stages. We can add custom fields wherever it makes sense to. Thinking a little bit more about custom fields, right? These are those targeted data points that support specific use cases. And these are flexible. They can be added anywhere in the system, right? Profiles, enrollments, assessments. They should be intentional value adds. This is best used to support care coordination, outcomes, or meaningful reporting and evaluation. And, I've kind of highlighted this in red here at the bottom. We shouldn't collect data for, maybe nice to haves, right? That could be nice to know someday. If we don't have a specific reason for collecting it, a very concrete use case for it, an intended way we're going to use that data point to help improve care coordination or evaluation, we really should avoid collecting data just for the sake of collecting it. We should be making sure we're not burdening participants with, just an onslaught of additional questions that don't have these targeted value adds. In terms of example custom fields, right? I'm kind of breaking this out by data collection stage. So client profiles, there's one profile per person, right? It's best for one. These custom fields on client profiles are best for once per person data collection needs. So for an example here that I'm highlighting, in one region of the balance estate, there are a lot of native indigenous folks and the tribes being served. And we added on client profiles this option for folks who'd like to share what their tribal affiliation is. And if they say yes, they are willing to share those details, this custom field of federally recognized tribe pops up that can be updated and added for them. Right? So once per person, best on those client profiles. When you think about once per enrollment data collection, generally we go with entry or enrollment screens within enrollments, right? We only need to capture this once per enrollment per person or even per household. This is an example of a custom county field we added for a balance of state provider who is serving participants, all over this region of the balance of state, not just the county associated with the agency or program on the back end. So this county field allows them to document not only was this participant served in the balance estate, they were served in this county within the balance estate. And these are some additional examples of questions we added on an entry screen once per enrollment for a region in the balance estate in a coordinated entry project. So these are collected once per enrollment for the head of household only, and the use case is very targeted to care coordination and prioritization needs for folks being served in coordinated entry. I don't have slides or examples kind of queued up for collecting custom fields like more than once per enrollment or maybe just at exit when people stop participating with programs. But I try to think of it like how many times per person or per enrollment do we need to collect this information? And that helps inform where it makes sense to layer those custom fields in the system. If I need to track data from project start through update through exit, would probably add that field on the entry screen, on those update screens, and on the exit screen. If it's just a field associated with, when people stop participating or exit from programs, we'd add the custom field on exit screen. So just trying to underscore kind of this flexible customization and the very targeted ways and use cases for how HMIS leads generally try to help create those data points in the system. All right, moving on, we have custom assessments, which are grouping related fields into structured data collection tools. And these support consistent collection of program or agency specific information, and they can be collected when it's appropriate to collect them, right? They can be collected during enrollment, they can be collected after exit, or they can be standalone assessments that don't require enrollments at all. They can help track progress and outcomes, establish baselines, evaluate outcomes, right? A lot of times folks are after custom assessments when they have, funding sources that don't generate, like it's not a HUD requirement to collect in the system, but maybe you have a local funding source and some data collection needs, and HMIS is your primary data collection vehicle. Custom assessments are usually how HMIS leads work with providers on those data collection needs to get them in place. Common examples of customized assessments are coordinated entry, right? Think VI SPDATs. Think assessments in HCOC that are customized for coordinated entry needs, right? There's structured data collection for those coordinated entry use cases. VI SPDATs themselves are considered a custom assessment in HMIS, and then each COC might have added customized questions for their local provider needs and participant needs. Current living situations, right? Those generally used within coordinated entry, street outreach, night-by-night emergency shelters, helping document where participants are staying when you're having a contact with them, right? You have the ability to add custom fields to those current living situations. There are geospatial location details that could be added, safety and wellness check information, really help you build a more robust history of engagement to inform care coordination. And as I mentioned kind of on the previous slide, they can also be agency and funding specific to help you capture meaningful data to support those program goals, coordination, and evaluation, right? The things that deviate from default data collection might make sense in one of these custom assessments. And a really neat example of an assessment are these post-exit follow-ups, which capture information after program exits and can help us understand longer-term outcomes for participants, right? After a participant exits, you can support that post-program evaluation and that comprehensive outcome tracking to measure success. They give you a kind of a dedicated way to maintain a connection and check in with participants after that exit, can help identify if additional support or program re-engagement may be needed for continued stability, and also help you measure that long-term impact, right? Seeing if folks exit to housing are still in that housing 6 months or a year down the road. And post-exit follow-ups are available within enrollments for participants within the assessments tab. They're only going to display after that exit has been created, right? A program end date has been captured, they've been exited. If you go to that assessments tab now within the enrollment, you'll see this follow-up assessment option, and you can click start to get going on it. After clicking start, there's some default questions that come through for these exit follow-ups, generally like capturing any changes to income, non-cash benefits, or health insurance, just like status updates and exits do by default. You have the option to capture the follow-up assessment date. And then in this specific screenshot, this is from a customized post-exit assessment the Balance Estate team worked on to help this provider document the type of follow-up assessment they're completing. So this is a 6-month follow-up, for example. I think the other option here was a 12-month follow-up. And the next custom field was, as of the time frame listed above, where was the head of household residing at that time, right? And this allows this provider with some custom reports to measure they exited on this date to this house situation. We followed up on this date at the 6-month mark, and they were still in that rental that was secured for them when they exited, right? So a really powerful tool that's underutilized that we wanted to call out in this overview, and kind of call out those custom field opportunities here as well. Moving on, we have services, which document specific assistance and activities provided to participants, which really allows for more granular collection, right? Recording what was provided during participation, not just that someone was enrolled in your programming, right? Tracking specific case management activities, financial assistance, meals and referrals, things like that. They're really flexible collection opportunities tailored to meet your agency needs. They can include details like time spent with that service or financial amounts provided. They can be captured within enrollments or as standalone services that only require that a participant have a profile. And there's a lot of benefits of collecting this information. You can demonstrate the program impact and level of assistance your teams are providing. They're visible in the history for the history tab that other providers can see, who's working with who's received what types of assistance. And they also keep folks active in the system, which is really important when you think about functionality like auto exits, where if participants don't have dedicated activity captured within their enrollments, they can be auto exited from those programs, generally for street outreach and night-by-night emergency shelter projects. So these services within your programming keeps people active within your enrollments and prevents them from being unintentionally auto exited out of those programs. All right, now let's take a look at some services in action in the system. And we're going to be highlighting some services used by our colleagues at the Community Economic Defense Project. They worked closely with the HMIS lead teams to build out a number of services based on their internal team's needs for the types of activities they provide to participants who are enrolled within their programs. And that's what we're looking at here. So once you navigate to a participant's program enrollment and you navigate to the Provide Services tab, you'd see all of the services that have been configured for your program down below. And these are ultimately up to your agency, whatever activities you are providing and want to track. Your HMIS lead team can help build those out for you. So these are examples of what CEDP built out. When you click on a specific service, so case management internal, for example, the types of internal case management that CEDP provides to participants enrolled in their programs, when you open that up by clicking it, you'll see all of the specific service items that are grouped in this specific service. So case management internal for CEDP includes advocacy, assessments, benefits assistance, case management, contact, and additional services below that aren't included in the screen chat. You really just give the service a date. In this example, April 29th, 2026. You can add a note if you would like. Those notes are visible in participants' history to other providers who would be able to review that note. So it'd be important to make sure that note is appropriate and not a clinical case note, for example. Anything that's relevant for care coordination that you wouldn't mind sharing with other providers can go into that service note. After entering the date and a note if you would like, you can click submit, and that will capture the service transaction for that participant. And then you could open up any other service and service item and assign that for participants as needed. Services that have been tracked for participants are visible in the participants history tab, which can be viewed by any other provider. So when you're in that history tab, you'd see all of these specific services that have been provided to this participant. And for non-CEDP staff members, you'd see a line item like this. You'd see the date associated, that double window icon, and that kind of single box icon there on the right. Contain additional details. Hovering over the double window icon tells you the program name, and then that kind of single box icon would be able to display that service note. So that's why I was flagging. Just be careful on any note you'd be adding to a service. Again, not appropriate for like a clinical case note to go in there, but anything that feels relevant for care coordination for your team and other providers that you wouldn't mind seeing can go in those service notes as well. Services are also incredibly easy to report on. And this is a custom report that was developed in Looker, our advanced reporting tool connected to the back end of HMIS. And it's where you can really quickly get eyes on, either row level services provided per person or maybe aggregate results of the total number of services and people who receive services of a specific type, right? So these kind of service names, the groups that those service items are stored in, and can bring in the category associated with the service, and then get easy breakdowns of the number of services your team provided and the number of unique participants who received those services. For services where you've enabled tracking financial assistance that was provided, you can also super easily report on the total amount of services that were provided. So again, just some aggregate results here of total services provided, total number of unique participants receiving those services, and across all of those services, the total amount of financial assistance that was tracked. So super easy to get eyes on all those details with these custom reporting tools. There's canned reports that do this too, that any end user can run. These advanced reports can be developed by your HMIS lead agency on your behalf, or if your team has gone through any kind of Looker training, you're also able, with the appropriate license and access level, to create these custom reports as well. And while sometimes tabular breakdowns of the unique number of people and services that were provided are all that you need, you can also visualize these results pretty easily too. So you can create a simple bar chart of, again, those total number of services in blue here, total number of client counts in green that receive those services, service by service. So it can create a quick infograph or visual, can download this image, can include it in a PDF or a custom report that your team is using without too much trouble using these reporting functionalities. All right, shifting gears just a little bit, let's talk about COHMIS tools that help you keep on top of your data quality in the system. Before we look at those specific data quality tools, let's take a moment to unpack what quality data actually means. Quality data should reflect reality. Participant information should be accurate, complete, and up to date. Records should reflect changes as they're happening, and we should be honoring participant choice. Folks who don't want to share a piece of information that isn't tied to eligibility of the program that they're receiving assistance from are within their rights to not share those details. Quality data should also support timely care coordination. Providers should be able to see who is actively working with a participant. Having that up-to-date info helps connect people to resources faster. And I think importantly here, missing or outdated data can lead to missed opportunities for our participants. Quality data also helps drive meaningful outcomes, tracking progress from entry to the program to housing and beyond, measuring changes in income, benefits, and stability, and helping inform system performance and funding opportunities. If you'll allow me to get on my data soapbox for just a moment, I really do believe that when used appropriately, taking care of the system is taking care of the person. Making sure we have accurate, up-to-date information being entered on a timely basis, especially for folks who have not yet been connected to housing resources. One of the best ways that you can be an advocate for your participant is to take care of the data that you're entering into the system on their behalf. All right, I'll climb back down off of my soapbox there, and now we'll dive into the common COHMIS data quality resources that we wanted to highlight. These resources for keeping your finger on the pulse of the data quality your agency is entering into the system. There's a number of reports in the report library, which are available to any end user with access to COHMIS. Many of those reports support monitoring compliance and data quality. Think like those annual performance reports or APRs, those CAPRs, those HMIS data quality reports. Those are available in multiple formats. They're interactive web versions where you can drill in and see specific participants who represent identified data quality issues. You can export to Excel or PDF to share more broadly with your team and work on cleanup efforts. And as you're working to clean that data up in HMIS, when you rerun those reports, those updates are reflected in real time, supporting that ongoing data review. There's also a number of quality assurance reports that have been developed and maintained by the COHMIS leads. Those are designed to still support federal, state, and local reporting, but also care coordination and system performance in ways that those kind of more canned reports in the report library don't always fully address. It can help us identify patterns and issues, informing potential training or technical assistance needs for providers, and can support proactive outreach and targeted data quality improvement. To access reports in the report library, you would start by clicking on that launcher waffle icon in the top menu bar, and then you'd click on the reports option. The most commonly used data quality reports are available in both that data quality reports section and in that HUD reports section. So we'll dive into those in just a second. Looking at these HUD data quality reports to get started, really it's the HMIS data quality report, the annual performance report, and that ESG CAPR, all of which have very similar data quality and data timeliness tables that we'll look at in just a moment. Before we look at the specific data quality tables in those reports, I wanted to go over a few tips for running these reports in the report library. If you're running an APR or a CAPR or a data quality report, you can pick whatever report date range that you want, but we'd really recommend that you're doing that for the grant year to date, right? So whatever your grant year start date is through the current date is really the best way to make sure you're catching all potential issues that are identified. If you're running it for a smaller chunk of time, you might not see the full picture of that data quality landscape for your program in the way that it will ultimately be looked at across the entirety of your grant year. And you can run it for more than a year at a time. We generally recommend running it for no more than 1 year at a time though. You also have a number of report output formats here. Web page is going to be your best bet if you want to be able to click on a number of a data quality issue and drill in and see the specific participants and the details associated with those errors. You can jump right from that drill down tab to a participant's profile and navigate to their enrollment and start your cleanup. And if you do need to distribute it to a larger team and kind of assign cleanup, maybe Excel or CSV here would be best to be able to disseminate those specific details that need to be corrected. All right, now let's take a look at some of the key data quality and data timeliness tables that are available in these data quality related reports in the report library, like APRs and CAPRs and that HMIS data quality report. The first two tables, Q6A and Q6B, are really looking at personally identifiable information. Think details on profiles, as well as some universal data elements that are captured within enrollments, right? Each of these tables has columns for client doesn't know or prefers not to answer, information missing, data issues, the total number of errors across that row, and then the percent of issue rate for that specific metric, and for Q6A, overall for all of those metrics combined. Client doesn't know and prefers not to answer. Those values they exist as response options, and they're appropriate to use when a participant doesn't know the answer to a question or prefers not to answer that question. And they are well within their rights to not know or prefer not to answer and still be enrolled and receive services from your agency, as long as that question that they're preferring not to answer or don't know isn't tied to your program's eligibility. Information missing is more data not collected, like your team didn't ask the question is really what that indicates. So maybe you could go back and fix those data not collected with additional conversations with your participants. Whereas client doesn't know and prefers not to answer, those just might be errors that continue to pop up because they're an expected part of HOMIS services data collection and won't be able to be fixed. Data issues can mean different things. It can mean that you selected an approximate or partial name or date of birth or social security number. It can be that the social security number is in a format that doesn't align with the social security number formats, right? Regardless, you can click on any of these numbers when you run it as a web page, and you can see the specific details that correspond to it. We'll do that in just a minute. The next two tables look at income and housing data quality captured within enrollments, and then kind of chronic homelessness data quality. Think of those prior living situation questions for adults and heads of households enrolling in your programs. Destination is one that we see quite often, right? Folks disappearing from your program without divulging the living situation they're going to be in at that time, right? If it is no exit interview completed or a data not collected, that is viewed as information that is missing and will be flagged in that column. And you might not be able to fix that, right? Another reality of the challenges of HOMIS services data collection. The income and sources at start and at annual assessment and at exit in table Q6C there, those are really values flagging if there are, any missing or inconsistent values with how income is being entered at those different data collection stages. If you think back earlier in the presentation, those snapshots of each of these data collection stages within your enrollments. Start meaning at entry. Annual assessment being at the anniversary of their enrollment into the program, and exit being when they stop participating and receive that project exit date out of the program. So those are kind of flagged there. I would call out that income and sources at annual assessment can be flagged if you have dated the annual assessment outside of the expected 30-day plus or minus date range of that anniversary date, right? So it can just be you completed the annual assessment, but you did it outside of that required date range. The chronic homelessness fields are really like, you're missing details around those prior living situation fields, the approximate date this episode of homelessness started, number of times, number of months. All of that can be flagged in that table there. Moving on, we have the data timeliness tables and the data quality of inactive records for outreach and night-by-night emergency shelter projects and path-funded services only project in Q6F there. The data timeliness is a super important aspect of data entry in the system, right? Making sure we're entering timely, accurate data for care coordination and to make sure we have up-to-date and accurate records for participants. By default, it splits out start and exit records that have been created within the reporting date range that was selected for the report. You have less than 0 days, which can be kind of a data quality issue in and of itself if you are kind of future dating things, which you shouldn't be doing. 0 days would be kind of the gold standard, right? You're doing data entry on the day you are specifying that data entry is for, right? So this is really measuring the metadata of when your team is actually entering the data in the system versus the date they are specifying that data is for. 1 to 3 days, 4 to 6 days, 7 to 10 days, and then 11 plus days are really as granular as these federal reports provide these breakdowns, which is nice to see how, the federal government evaluates timeliness, but also kind of a limitation that custom reporting can help us move beyond. And these inactive records can be really helpful. I believe this flags folks who haven't had either bed nights for night-by-night shelters or current living situations for street outreach or path-funded services only projects if those haven't happened within the last 90 days. So number of records would be all of the folks that were active in those types of projects versus the number of inactive records, which would be those that haven't had those specific activities captured within the past 90 days. So a really helpful way to kind of assess, hey, are there any records for participants, enrollment records that we haven't worked with in a while that we either should add activity for or should exit out of the program? And drill down functionalities of those web-based reports, right? Picking that web-based format allows you to click any number in any table to see a corresponding list of participants that make up that number, which is really helpful for drilling in and fixing your data quality issues. So for example, if we click on the number 2 in destination here, if we picked web page as the drill down, clicking that number 2 loads those results in a new tab, and I see the 2 participants that correspond to this destination error. And if I click on a client profile, or a unique identifier, I'll be taken directly to their profile where I can navigate to their enrollment and start reviewing and fixing that identified data quality issue. So a really helpful way to navigate data quality and get to the root causes and hopefully fix them if you can. And if you're interested to learn more about exit destinations and their impact on data quality, we have a great article on our help desk that goes over those destinations in way more detail. What does HUD consider a positive or housed destination versus a temporary or institutional or homeless situation, or kind of a missing data or data quality value? That help desk article can really help outline those specifics for you. In addition to those kind of, core canned reports most folks are familiar with, those APRs, CAPRs, data quality reports, there's also a number of underutilized data quality reports in that data quality report section of the report library. And we're going to highlight the monthly staff report up first here. Can really give you some agency-wide breakdowns of what data quality is looking like agency-wide, right? You can pick a date range and then get to see specifics about the staff members on your team, who's active, who's been working with clients, who's been creating new clients, their average timeliness in days, and their percentage of don't know, prefers not to answer, data not collected values across the board. A really quick and easy way to get an idea of who's doing what within the system and who might be struggling to collect certain values. This can help identify maybe some staff members who need some technical assistance or additional training for how we're asking to collect data from participants. You'll also see an active staff with no activity kind of flagging staff who have not logged in a while, right? So this could help prompt reaching out to your HMIS lead agency to flag Jennifer left the organization and we need to deactivate her HMIS account, for example. You also get a number of specific details for different data collection stages, right? Those client profile data elements and the total number of doesn't know or prefers not to answer data not collected values that exist, and the percentage of each that are happening. Same with those program entry statistics, all of those specific data elements being captured within program enrollments, and those data elements at exit as well. So a great kind of agency-wide snapshot this monthly staff report can be, and we wanted to make sure folks knew about it and were able to access it and use it if it is of interest or value to your team. Up next, we have the program data review report, where you can see results for a specific program. So not just, agency-wide, maybe I just want to see details for one of my programs. The parameters for this report are really simple. You get to pick the program name that your agency, the program at your agency you want to run the report for, the status, which is either active participants or participants who have exited, and then that report output format of web page, which comes with the drill downs, or PDF or Excel. That's it. This report's super easy to run. And then after you run it, any participant that is listed in red has an identified data quality issue, right? And you can kind of click in and see those specifics, go to their profiles if you ran this as a web page. Any participant listed in black does not have any data quality issues. The client project stay issues report is also helpful for reviewing program enrollments per data collection stage. So all these reports are kind of just slicing and dicing these data quality issues in slightly different ways, right? This one, instead of every single data element, it's more, here are the program entry issues, here are the program exit issues, here are program assessment income cash issues, right? On down the line, you can see any records that are identified as having one of these issues. And then if you run this as a web page, you can click on that number and drill in and see the specifics. Now, those are the reports in the report library, but custom reporting and dashboards really allow us to move beyond kind of what is pre-built, either specified by HUD and federal reporting partners for an HMIS by default, or our vendor, BitFocus, who provides a number of additional data quality reports that we just looked at. They are what they are, right? They're programmed the way that they are, and we can't change them. With Looker, our advanced reporting tool, we can create some custom reports. And these can be for custom reporting needs. There's self-service access. Users who have that appropriate license can build their own looks. A look is basically Looker's version of a report. Or dashboards, which is just a collection of looks assembled together. Your lead agency can support you with these dashboards and looks. They can help create them, or they can help ensure that you are trained and can create these reports yourselves. They really allow for this more granular analysis, building reports that help with care coordination, program evaluation, or even visualization. It's a great way to move beyond the confines of the pre-built reports into the customized world of what you might actually need to be looking at. Tableau dashboards are something else that the HMIS leads work to develop as well. And those are a more flexible reporting framework for operational reports and dashboards, visualizing key metrics, right? The total number of participants who've been served, new enrollments, housing placements, exit outcomes. They can help us with program and funding performance, understanding and demonstrating the impact across programs and funding sources, trying to identify trends to inform funding and resource allocation. And they also help us with public reporting needs, supporting state of homelessness and other public-facing reports that the COHMIS leads and our stakeholders co-develop together to tell the story of our homeless response system and the impact of our collective efforts in Colorado. This is an example of a custom report built in Looker to monitor current living situations, or CLS, for a provider in the balance estate. And this is to help their team ensure they are monitoring engagement for participants enrolled in their street outreach programs. They want to ensure that every person who is actively enrolled in their outreach program has had a current living situation captured within the past 90 days. So anybody who has not had a current living situation captured comes into this report. We can schedule these reports to go directly to providers. If there are names or PII included in the report, we schedule that through encrypted messages. If it's just unique identifiers, we schedule it directly to email, and folks can review the specifics and navigate. Oh, we need to make sure that we add a current living situation for this participant to get them off of this list. And this is an example of one of these statewide dashboards we've developed in Tableau, where we're looking at exit outcomes, right? So we're trying to regularly review dashboards to ensure the breakdowns we're seeing make sense. We have kind of statewide views by default. You can filter down by COC. You can filter by project type for your specific agency, for your specific project name. Trying to kind of have a a one-stop shop to see what things look like across the response system, or for, in this scenario here, looking at exit outcomes for homelessness prevention projects in Colorado for Q1 of 2026, right? 85% of participants exiting to house destinations. If we hover over that bar chart in each of those colors, we'll get to see the specific destinations that correspond to those exit outcomes of permanent, temporary, institutional, homeless, or other. So kind of a way to keep our thumb on the pulse of the data in our system, the outcomes for our participants overall, COC by COC, project type by project type, agency by agency, or even project by project. And then we also wanted to highlight, some best practices for data quality. Right? Review those dashboards and standard reports, on a cadence that makes sense for you and your team. Is that weekly? Is that monthly? Ultimately, you just want to make sure you're doing routine data quality checks, right? You're not just waiting until there is a report due to take a peek under the hood and see what kind of disconnects exist. It's way easier to have regular QA, quality assurance processes going and catching things as they're happening and fixing them as they're happening, instead of waiting to the end of the year and having a long list of things that you need to address. Discuss these data quality issues, these data initiatives in team meetings or in huddles, right? Make that a part of your regular meetings. Provide refresher training on data entry as needed for your team, right? We have an annual refresher training all end users of the system have to go through, but you can provide regular refresher training on any concepts that you might notice by running these data quality or quality assurance reports, helping your team make sure they understand the why behind the data and how that, connects to supporting participants. And then establish feedback loops with your staff and with your participants, right? Make sure there is a conversation with your participants, updating income, non-cash benefits, health insurance changes as they're happening for them along the way. So those are kind of the best practices we'd want to highlight. We also want to highlight a number of resources that exist here, both that were developed, or specific to COHMIS, or those that are from our federal reporting partners at HUD. So at the COHMIS Help Desk is really your one-stop shop of all of the resources the HMIS leads in Colorado have developed. You can submit tickets to your HMIS lead agency. You can access data and reporting resources, including video tutorials, walkthroughs on troubleshooting data qualities in an APR, advanced reporting with Looker, and that exit destination crosswalk are just a few of those that are highlighted in this slide. The HUD resources are more, those federal HMIS data standards manuals, the standard reporting terminology glossary, clarifying definitions used across reports, and then even programming specifications for folks who really want to take a look at technical guidance and the logic for how these federal reports are programmed. Would encourage you to reach out to your HMIS lead agency, submit a ticket. Our teams are here to support you, to provide assistance, to provide training, whatever you need in relation to using the system. Please feel free to reach out and ask for that support. And thank you for your time today in this webinar, and thank you to our colleagues at the SHG Advisors who allowed me to participate in this webinar. And appreciate your time.